Today's video is another idea that was suggested on one of our videos recently, and following on from Kylian Mbappe's heroics at the 2018 World Cup, it seemed like a good time to take it on. Mbappe is certainly the most talented and accomplished teenager in world football right now, but he doesn't rank among our top 7 of all time. Before we start, the primary criteria here is simply how good the player was in their teenage years, typically between their 16th and 20th birthdays. But factors such as the number of games they played and what they accomplished are naturally also taken into account. There will also be some very honourable mentions at the end of this video. Here are our 7 greatest teenage footballers of all time. Cesc Fabregas. 7th place was actually the trickiest decision in this 7, and you'll see why when we get to the honourable mentions. There are 2 or 3 players who we'd say were probably even more talented than Cesc Fabregas in their teens, but the Spaniard sneaks in by virtue of the extraordinary amount of game time he had accumulated before his 20th birthday. Fabregas joined Arsenal from Barcelona at the age of 16, soon becoming the club's youngest ever debutant and youngest ever goalscorer, both of which records still stand. He made over 150 Arsenal appearances as a teenager, which is virtually unheard of. Lionel Messi had fewer than half that number for Barcelona at the same age for comparison. Fabregas was so good, he prompted Arsene Wenger into allowing Patrick Vieira to leave for Juventus, as Fabregas inherited both his shirt number and his place next to Gilberto Silva in the Gunners' starting 11. Having won both the Golden Ball and the Golden Shoe at the 2003 Under-17 World Cup, Fabregas won both the Golden Boy and the Bravo Award in 2006 after a dominant performance in the 2006 Champions League final. Equally impressively, Fabregas racked up 15 caps for Spain as a teenager, despite having to compete with the likes of Xavi, Iniesta, Xabi Alonso, and Marcos Senna for a starting berth. Jimmy Greaves. There are a couple of English centre forwards I'm sure many of you would have been expecting to feature here or in the honourable mentions, but the only one who makes the 7 proper is the greatest British forward of the lot, Jimmy Greaves. The highest scorer in the history of English football's top flight, Greaves was a born goalscorer. He proved that with 122 goals in a single season for Chelsea's youth team at the age of 16, so it was little wonder that he was promoted to the first team the following season. In his debut campaign, aged 17, Greaves scored 22 goals in 37 games. He followed that up with 37 goals in 47 games, which made him the First Division's top scorer, still in his teens. In total, Greaves scored a remarkable 82 goals in 113 games for Chelsea as a teenager, as well as 2 goals from 5 caps for the English national team. George Best. 2 of the finest players Britain have ever produced feature consecutively in this 7, as George Best beats Jimmy Greaves into 5th place. It's no surprise that exceptionally technical and seemingly naturally gifted players should exceed in their early years, possibly falling away in their later years dependent upon their attitude, lifestyle, and application, and some of the most technically gifted footballers of all time feature in this 7 and in the honourable mentions. George Best is certainly a man who falls into that category. An individualist who could thrill and frustrate in equal measure, few players have been as gifted on the ball and when running at opposition defences. Best's talents were clear from a young age, and he scored 37 goals in 128 games as a teenager for Manchester United. Best's teenage peak came in March 1966 when he scored twice in a European Cup quarter-final win away at Benfica, a match which saw him crowned the 5th Beatle. Ronaldo. In his debut season with Cruzeiro, age 16, Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima scored 20 goals in 21 games. A star had been born in Belo Horizonte, and he reinforced his class with 24 goals in 26 games the following season. The young forward made Brazil's squad as they won the World Cup in America in 1994, although he didn't manage to get a game, and that summer he transferred to PSV of the Netherlands. In Europe, Ronaldo was just as prolific, bagging 35 goals in 36 games in his first season and 19 in 21 in his second, with the Dutch title challengers. He joined Barcelona for a world record-breaking fee of £13.2 million while still a teenager, and went on to establish himself as one of the most ferociously talented footballers in the history of the game despite a string of horrific injuries. Diego Maradona. Only 2 footballers have ever set multiple world record transfer fees. Both players did so before their 21st birthday, and both feature in this 7. They are Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima and Diego Armando Maradona. Maradona's teens were remarkably his most prolific period as a footballer. He scored 19 goals in 49 games in his first full season with Argentinos Juniors, 26 in 35 the following season, then 26 from 26, and finally 43 goals in 45 games in the 1980 season, which he began as a 19-year-old and ended as a 20-year-old. You can make a very good case for Maradona being the most extraordinarily talented human being to ever step foot onto a football pitch. A force of nature with magic in his boots, Maradona was a flawed genius, but a genius nonetheless. He was the Argentine Primera Division's top scorer twice and the South American Footballer of the Year twice in his teens, before going on to inspire Argentina and Napoli to glory in the 1980s. Johan Cruyff. Marco van Basten once said that Johan Cruyff was technically perfect from a footballing perspective as a boy, and that is why he turned his attention to the tactical side of the game so early. Whether he was, and whether it is possible to be technically perfect, is up for debate, but only one man has been a more talented footballer in their teens than Johan Cruyff in our eyes. Like Maradona, Cruyff's most prolific years came in his teens, averaging roughly a goal a game for Ajax before his 20th birthday. Cruyff scored 4 goals in 10 games in his first season as a bit part player, followed by 25 in 23 and 41 in 41 over the next 2 campaigns. Following his teens, Cruyff went on to start at Barcelona, win 3 Ballon d'Ors and reach a World Cup final, before becoming one of the most influential coaches in the history of the game. Pele. The undisputed greatest teenager in football history, and rarely has there been an easier top spot in Sevens history, is Brazilian legend Pele. In fact, at the age of 17, which was when most of the others in this 7 were making their debuts, Pele had already reached a level none of them came close to in their teens, and one few players in the history of the game have come close to in their entire careers. Pele made his own debut for Santos at the age of 15, and it will come as little surprise when I tell you that he scored. The teenager made a bit of a habit of scoring goals, bagging 2 and 2 in his first season as a 15-year-old, followed by 41 goals in 38 games as a 16-year-old, 66 goals in 46 games as a 17-year-old, 53 goals in 43 games at 18, and 33 goals in 33 games in his final season before turning 20. Those numbers are hard to get your head around, or at least they should be, because they're the numbers you would expect an all-time great to be hitting at their absolute peak. Pele was doing it at 16, and I will confirm for any skeptics that those statistics only count official matches, not friendlies or dubious exhibition games. Of course, those statistics are extraordinary, but a teenage Pele is best known for one thing, and that is the 1958 World Cup. The 5th youngest player in World Cup history to this day, Pele had the greatest impact upon a World Cup by a teenager ever, with very little genuine competition. Pele went into the tournament with a slight knee injury and didn't feature until Brazil's 3rd match against the Soviet Union, where he assisted his strike partner Vava. In his 2nd match, Pele scored the game's only goal in a 1-0 quarter-final win over Wales. His 3rd appearance came in the semi-final, and it will be one of the finest in the history of the World Cup. Pele was just unplayable, linking everything in Brazil's play in the final third, as well as scoring a hat-trick against the French. He added a brace as Brazil won emphatically in the final against Sweden, but by that point, few were surprised. The name of the 17-year-old Pele was on everybody's lips, and football would never quite be the same again. That's it for the 7 proper, but honourable mentions go to Patrick Kluivert, who had 2 20-plus goal seasons, helping Ajax to win 2 league titles and scoring the winner in a Champions League final at the age of 18. Wayne Rooney, who amassed more than 130 appearances and 40 goals as a teenager, as well as scoring a hat-trick in his Champions League debut and starring for England at Euro 2004 as an 18-year-old. Gianluigi Buffon, who deserves some love in a 7 unsurprisingly dominated by forward players, since the Italian broke into the Parma starting 11 at the age of 17, which is incredibly young for a goalkeeper, and he famously kept a clean sheet against AC Milan on his debut. Gerd Müller, who scored 122 goals as a teenager, albeit a large number of them outside of Germany's top flight. Joseph Bican, who is the only man to rival Pele in terms of goal scoring before turning 20, if one includes friendly games, and was already averaging better than 1.5 goals per game in league football as well. And lastly, Michael Owen, who scored on virtually every debut he ever made, enjoyed multiple 20-plus goal seasons for Liverpool, had won both the Premier League Golden Boot as well as being named Premier League Player of the Year, and scored one of the all-time great World Cup goals, all before his 20th birthday. I'm sure we've missed some great shouts, for the honourable mentions particularly, so let us know some of your candidates in the comments. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out some of our other videos, such as those on screen now and most likely a fair few below this video if you're watching on mobile, or to the right of your screen if you're watching on PC. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more from us, and you can also follow us on Twitter at HITC Sevens.